Hello again, my name is Dr. Bill Johnson, and I'd like to welcome you to another edition of Exploring Our Schools. I am surrounded by one person today, and he is really the heart and soul of Southside High School. It is the principal, John Murphy. And we're here to talk to you about a very, very special event that is about to occur, but actually was announced earlier. And that is that Southside High School has been selected as a Blue Ribbon School. Most people don't understand what that means, and so consequently we're here today to discuss that, what it means, and why it's really important to get behind just the language associated with the award from the federal government. So let me begin with John and ask you, if you don't mind, what is a Blue Ribbon School?
The Blue Ribbon School program started in the early 80s to recognize schools who achieved higher than expectations. It starts with results and scores, but then extends to a more elaborate application that looks at the school holistically. We did earn it once in 1997, so this is our second time in 20 years.
You know, but when you say higher than expectations, in other words, we exceed what they expect of us. I'm not sure what exactly that means, and I'm not sure. In other words, we have pretty high expectations for our schools. We have pretty high expectations, this community does, for the performance of our kids within the system. So I'm not sure when you say that the federal government has said we've exceeded that, are we actually exceeding, or are we just living up to the expectations our community expects of us?
It's a relative term, but their first metric is to look at schools who are in the top 20% of standardized test scores based on New York State assessments, and to have no appreciable gaps between different demographics.
Okay.
Those who traditionally perform highly and those historically disadvantaged students, special needs students, free and reduced lunch.
So there are two components to this, at least.
For the first hurdle, yes.
Yeah. Now, when you say a first hurdle, I mean, it is interesting to note, we don't run out and say we want to be a Blue Ribbon School. Somebody in New York State or someone in the federal government picks out those schools that they consider to be eligible to even apply. So we get invited by the state to apply.
Correct. 20 schools K through 12 were invited to apply based on the initial criteria.
In New York State?
Correct.
All right. And then around the nation, each state has a certain number of schools that then apply.
Right.
And I believe in the nation there's a little over 310 schools.
I think that's
nationwide.
Right.
So it is somewhat rarefied, and I believe that there are something like 26 or 27,000 schools in the country, high schools.
Yep.
And so just to be one among just the high schools, not just the elementaries, but the high schools. So let's talk a little bit about the two pieces of information that I think are really critical. One is the high expectations. What are they looking for? Do you know? I mean, you do know because you filled out the application.
Well,
That's why you're sitting here.
They are, but I think the thing that appealed to me about the application, which is easy for me to say after the fact because it was fairly intensive, was they didn't want just numbers. They wanted a narrative. They wanted us to tell the story of what created that performance data. It was very similar, by the way, to the Schools of Opportunity Award that we did 2 years ago, where they look at separate criteria like support services, like clubs and extracurricular activities, like athletics, like teacher support, professional development, leadership, community involvement. They look at all of those factors to try to find a narrative and to see what it is that makes those schools successful. Because really, the award is to celebrate those schools, but it's also to provide models for other schools so that they can at least cull from what we do to their own.
Yeah, it's really nice for us to be able to say this to the community, but at the same time, understanding that the other governmental agencies, both the state and the federal government, really are in this business to select schools that can be lighthouse school districts for other places to emulate. And so their purpose is a little bit different than ours. But nevertheless, it's really nice to be on that list. Talk about the gaps. I know that was not, at least within our application, one of the primary focus points. But I do know that nationally it is, equity is a huge issue. and it is always a component of the decision-making that's made by both the state and the federal government in identifying schools that are successful.
That's right, and I think in the questions that they're asking, there's a shift in that conversation that historically you've talked about an achievement gap. Those students who achieve lower or higher than their peers, to an opportunity gap. The conversation is talking about the availability and the richness of opportunities that are available to all students, which as a consequence and a result, lowers the achievement gap. So the focal point was about access, both to resources, to course offerings, to support services, and to real achievement. In other words, has the school provided students where their opportunity to succeed is an authentic one, and we've provided all the services that we can for students to let them really realize their full potential.
So no matter what their background, wherever they come, whether they are wealthy or they are poor, whether they are special ed or non-special ed, they all have access to the same opportunity to achieve at a high level.
Correct.
I mean, that to me is the way in which I read much of the criteria that I've read at the Blue Ribbon School. Very, very important component to the decision-making that they make in selecting us as one of the, as a Blue Ribbon School. So let's, if we could, just talk a little bit about the narrative. I know you filled out the application and a number of the pieces that you were describing. What are some of those things? And not that I want to get into the amount of time or an effort that it took, but I suspect that the narrative was easy to do, it's just time consuming. What are some of those things that really you would like to highlight?
One of the things, and it's the invisible factors that if you walk up and down the hallways you don't see, but we know drives the building, like the instructional vision. Is there a holistic, consistent instructional vision that transcends not just the high school, but the district? Do we know what we're looking for in good instruction? Do we have evidence to support that? And have we implemented it consistently across disciplines, across teachers, so that it's a shared development of what we know makes good instruction? Is there collaboration between teachers, special education department, and our general education teachers? Are the support services coincide with the general education classes? In other words, what they're looking for are connections in between different silos that traditionally in a high school never talk to one another. And it is an area that we're constantly improving upon. It's not that we've reached our zenith in that regard, but we're moving in the right direction. Ironically, a lot of the things that they're looking for aren't particularly new or innovative. They're actually just good instruction. Most of the literature that's available now is talking about those old, for lack of a better word, but vital components: communication skills, writing, public speaking, problem solving. They've been around for ages, and actually what is old is new, and those things actually do prove to be the most effective in changing a student's life.
Much of that resides in a staff that really buys in. Talk a little about our teaching staff here. I mean, I know you and I are very proud of what they're able to accomplish and their commitment to the kids in this community. And that all plays a significant part when you talk about the connectivity between and among the various departments or silos or whatever it may be. It really has its origins with it's just not you being committed. There is a commitment on the part of every single one of our teachers to achieving at the same high level.
Success is contagious. And when you hire and recruit the right people, you lead a fortunate life. And high performance comes with a cost, a human cost. But the teachers have a vested interest. They love the students, and they love them enough to know when to push and to know what to make them successful. There's not a teacher in this building who I don't doubt their sincerity and their love for their students and their love for the profession. And you could see it, it's contagious, both in the extra help that they provide students, both in those services that they provide after school. Things that are quietly and subtly becoming more commonplace, like our social emotional learning curriculum that started in the social workers and the guidance office, but there was buy-in immediately because the staff knew this is going to help students. What can I learn about mindfulness to make my students more self-aware and reflective? What can I learn about myself? These little pervasive things, while are new and innovative, are part of that whole paradigm. how can I make students' lives better?
Is that why you were humming the other day in the office?
I was, right, that's why I have my new stand-up desk.
There you go, right.
Right.
So, look, you're absolutely correct. I mean, there are so many dimensions to what happens in the classroom, and I think that when you talk about SEL or social emotional learning and the expansion of that into the classroom, there is in the part of our staff a certain degree of sensitivity to what it is that our kids actually need within those rooms. And in my conversations with you, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, the willingness to take on that responsibility about creating a variety of different opportunities for kids within a single setting. Does that make a difference for, I mean, certainly makes a difference for kids, but in the application, we are able to illustrate or to talk about any of that?
We are, and know that it's an imperfect but constantly evolving union. I'm not going to create a picture of Shangri-La. No human resource system is going to be that way. There are disagreements, there's conflicts, but within those conflicts, 99 times out of 100, we come out of it a better place because there's an ability to listen. We're actually trying to demonstrate those skills and competencies that we want the students to walk away with. To know that disagreement and dissonance isn't necessarily a liability, but you have to learn how to navigate that. And we've come up with some pretty innovative plans and procedures. We're still dealing with the 21st century. It's 2018 is a fascinating world for young people, but also a very demanding and taxing one. So we're constantly looking for new answers, and the answers are here within this building. We know they are.
You know, it's funny, the world changes. We used to talk about intergenerational changes. It changes about 6 times with every generation now. Every 2 or 3 years, we're dealing with entirely, almost a new blueprint about what it is that we have to deal with within a classroom.
That's right. And I think we've looked at it closely, you and I, especially over the last 8 years. There's a variety of factors, external and internal, that we have to address that are vying for student time and resources in an increasingly flat, global, competitive world. And finding that balance and finding what's enough.
So there is agreement between us and the federal government on what kids really need, and they feel that we are achieving that. You know, in a sentence or two, could you just kind of describe what do you think their vision is of where kids should be, and how do we actually align with that vision?
Students should leave high school so that the opportunities and experiences that they have in the future are theirs to select and shouldn't be limited due to a lack of opportunity or experiences in high school. That means we own more of the responsibility than traditionally was held to make sure that they have those experiences, so that if they want to be a biologist, at least they know what a biologist does before they leave high school. And that's what it is. It's about choice, but lifelong choices.
You know, I don't know that we can emphasize that more strongly, and I would truly hope, I believe, that New York State is on the same page with us. It's giving kids all of the skills that they need by the time they finish with us to make either really good choices about continuing their education or, in fact, entering the workforce and feel that they are comfortable and competent to learn whatever the skills are that are necessary to make them a competent worker or a competent student. Are we doing that?
I should hope so. Are we doing it perfectly? No.
Okay.
I think anyone who says that has already missed the boat. We're constantly looking for better ways to do it, but we have strong evidence to support that our students leave here successful. They're successful in their postgraduate and career opportunities. You know that we've been looking into that
Right.
long terms, but we also have to be careful that I'm not preparing students for a world that ended 20 years ago.
So the blue ribbon schools are not necessarily, it's not about the end. It's really about the journey. They're really saying that we've chosen a good path and we're headed in the right direction. And I don't want to let anybody think for 1 second that we've achieved everything that we want. I know in discussions with you and other members of our staff that we are in an ever-evolving system. But it's good to know that somebody recognizes to some extent that we are at least making good choices about the path that we've chosen to walk. Are there other items that actually contributed to the concept of Blue Ribbon? You were talking about some of the extracurricular activities and the connections that kids make to this as a community.
Well, it doesn't come as a coincidence that the Blue Ribbon program grew out of the Nation at Risk era, when William Bennett created a book that said that our students are falling behind nationally relative to their international peers. So there is another look in the Blue Ribbon schools from a global perspective to look at how have you culled the best practices, not just from us nationally, but also globally. Does the student understand what a global citizen comprises of? Being American and being international are not mutually exclusive constructs. Do they have a firm grasp and understanding of their own cultural literacy and expand upon that to place it in the global context? They're looking for the more critical thinking, critical learning innovations. Do we have approaches to STEM that are commensurate with the needs and demands of the increasingly diverse fields? I take a lot of pride in the fact that our coding initiative, while is new, isn't restricted to just our traditionally engineering science students, that there are computational problem-solving skills that are going to be required of all of us. Things like that, looking beyond those compartmentalized traditional routes and giving students a real authentic feel for all the different areas, and knowing you're not really preparing for a career, you're preparing for a skill set. Where it applies to, we'll see.
Yeah, what is amazing to me is we begin to look down the road, and even in our lifetime, how many times we've had to change the skill set that allowed us to succeed at whatever the position we had within our local school systems. I think that's just going to accelerate for the kids who are graduating now. That cycle, which may have been every 5 or 6 or 7 years, has now been compressed to be almost every 2 or 3 or 4 years. So the skill set that you're talking about, which enables them to actually succeed at becoming a lifelong learner, whether they choose college or they choose the workforce, you and I both know we cannot learn a new skill set. Just look at what technology has done for our life. It is a very, very different environment in which we work. But it doesn't take away jobs as much as it creates a whole new set of jobs for kids. So we have to be prepared to give them the skill set that allow them to learn all of this.
I think that's exactly right, and I think this is where the joy as well as the anxiety comes in. What we're not saying is that student who loves the art classes needs to make themselves an engineer. You can't be all things to all people. You have to be yourself and grow into your own areas of strengths and creativity. Know what goes on in those other fields. You can think mathematically and still be an artist. You can think poetically and still be an engineer. Feed your passion and allow those passions to really evolve, to know what your passions are, but also have a breadth of understanding and learning so that going out there, if you do change your careers, I had no idea I was going to be going to education, that you're at least receptive and open to it.
That's a whole discussion for another day.
Okay.
But, we're done. Today we're done. We've finished. And I think, to tell you the truth, what's so interesting, you end, feed your passion. And that really is what Southside is all about. Creative ways in which we can allow our kids to feed their passion, find out who they are, and create the person that they want to be. So, in my mind, that's why we are a Blue Ribbon School. So, any last words, John?
No, thank you for the opportunity, and thanks to the community. It's a community award, not a high school award.
It really is, and I hope that our high school is truly reflective of what this community considers a really important value system connected to the education of its children. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us, and my congratulations to Southside High School, to John Murphy and the entire staff, and my thanks to the community for the support that you provide to what I think is an incredibly wonderful school system that would not be what it is were it not for the support from this community. So thank you again for joining us, and we hope to see you next time. Bye now.